I'd like to welcome you to this Brain Shark produced by the Glendon Association and Psych Alive on the Division of the Mind with myself, Dr. Lisa Firestone. So what we're proposing is that each of us is divided. That part of us is goal-directed and life-affirming, and that's our real self. But another part of us is self-critical, self-hating, and its ultimate end self-destructive, and that this is our anti-self. So how we see ourselves in our world is very much influenced by whether we're in the point of view of our real self or our anti-self. When we're in the point of view of our real self, we tend to see things in a more positive light, as though our glass were half full. When we're in the point of view of our anti-self, this colors how we see the whole world, and we may see things in a much more cynical light, as though our glass is half empty. Now, as I mentioned, this division is based on our early life experiences. How our parents felt toward themselves and how they felt toward us are both going to affect this division and how it gets formed. So often, what we're hearing, particularly at times of stress in our own heads, is things that were said to us when we were a child. Okay, so I would like to go into this division of the mind in a little more detail. First of all, we believe the division that exists within all of us originally stems from parental ambivalence. Now, I'm not trying to blame parents here. I'm a parent, as many of you probably are as well. But parents are real people, and as real people, there's things that we love about ourselves and there's things that we hate about ourselves. And we tend to extend both of these reactions to our products, to our children. The take-home message to parents here is that the most important thing you can do for your child is to feel good about yourself. Now, the positive side of this leads to parental nurturance, something that we all like to think about, but the negative side can lead to parental rejection, neglect, and hostility, particularly at moments of stress. Now, the positive side of this division results in our self system, that real self that I was talking about earlier. It's made up of the unique individual characteristics that we come into the world with, our genetic predispositions and our temperament, along with our harmonious identification and incorporation of parents' positive attitudes and traits, and parents' positive behaviors, like their attunement, their affection, their control. It feels like love to have control, actually. When children feel no control, they don't feel cared about. Nurturance, and the effect of other nurturing experience. So it's not just our parents, but other caring adults. And optimally, each child would have 5 caring adults in their life to fully develop themselves. So, and any caring adult can make a difference. So again, the take-home message here is that anyone can be that caring adult in a child's life that gives them the message that they matter. And resilient kids who come out of very difficult situations and do well had at least one caring adult, studies show. So on the positive side of this division, there's our personal attitudes, our goals, and our conscience. So there's our realistic positive attitudes toward ourselves, where we evaluate our talents and abilities with a generally positive and compassionate attitude, but we see ourselves realistically, and we also extend this compassion and this friendly point of view toward other people. And that leads us to engage in behavior that's both ethical toward ourselves and ethical towards others. There's our goals, the things we really need and want and that give our life meaning. And this leads us to goal-directed behavior, where we go after the things we want. And then there's our moral principles, our own moral compass, which allows us to act with integrity, where our words and our actions match. So what we say we believe in really coincides with how we behave. But what about the negative side of this division within ourselves, the anti-self system? It's also made up of our unique vulnerability. We may come into the world with genetics that make us more vulnerable, or a temperament that makes us more vulnerable to a negative outcome. So there is what we come into the world with that affects the development of this anti-self system as well. But then there are destructive parental attitudes and behaviors, misattunements, lack of affection, rejection, neglect, hostility, and over-permissiveness, which also feels like not being cared about, as I mentioned earlier. And when I say misattunements, what I mean is that not that good parents get it right all the time, but when they misattune with their child or miss with them, what they do is they go back and repair. But parents who've had, again, more unresolved trauma and loss are going to have a harder time doing this, partly because they're not going to know all of the misattunement that has occurred in those flip-lid states, and so they're going to have a hard time repairing that with their child. So again, I just want to stress that even perfect parents are misattuned at moments, but they go back and repair. Other factors that impact on the development of this negative side of the self include things like accidents, illnesses, traumatic separations that happen early in the child's life, along with death anxiety. So we believe that we initially form defenses to deal with psychological pain in our earliest relationships, but that these defenses become much more etched into our personality with the realization of death. They become more character traits, if you will. And this happens for children somewhere between the ages of 3 and 7, and they start to ask lots of questions about death. And this is really difficult and painful for parents and for children going through this stage. And we believe that the core defense that we form is something we call the fantasy bond. And if you'd like to learn more about that, press on this link and you will go directly to our Brain Shark about the fantasy bond. But the fantasy bond is basically a process of parenting ourselves, where we're both soothing ourselves and punishing ourselves, much as we were treated early on. We basically take our parents in, particularly at moments of stress, and throughout life we often are treating ourselves the way we were treated. We also tend to act in ways that get other people to treat us the way we were treated. So then when we get into romantic relationships, we may very quickly provoke our partner to treat us in ways that are much as we were treated as we were a child, or sometimes we select a partner who's much like somebody from our early lives, so they automatically are treating us like we were treated when we were young. Or sometimes we switch roles and we pick a partner where we act out our parent on them and we treat them the way we were treated. But if all else fails, we do this to ourselves. Throughout our lives, we tend to recreate our early lives by parenting ourselves and by provoking reactions similar to the ones we experienced as a child, those reactions that we adapted to in other people in our environment. So as we were saying, the fantasy bond is our core defense, but our secondary line of defense is the critical inner voice, the negative thoughts that we have toward ourselves and about other people that keep us in this defended posture of wanting to parent ourselves. So in terms of the critical inner voice that represents this part of the self-parenting process that's negative or self-critical, what we found is 3 levels or stages of self-attack in our research. The first are the everyday self-critical thoughts that we all have at one time or another toward ourselves. You're incompetent, you're stupid, you're going to make a fool of yourself. These thoughts not only make us feel lousy about ourselves, but they also tend to alienate us from other people, because when we're feeling down about ourselves is not when we feel like being around others. We tend to isolate, and this process gets worse. The second level that we're going to talk about are micro-suicidal or injunctions, or the negative thoughts that we have after we've engaged in an addictive behavior in terms of the self-punishing part, the ways we beat ourselves up. Thoughts like, you creep, you said you weren't going to have any more drinks, and there you go having another drink. Or, you said you were going to be good on your diet, and now you've blown it. These self-punishing thoughts that we have after engaging in addictive behavior tend to make us feel more and more distressed, and they actually predispose us to engage in more addictive behavior, to eat the rest of the cake or drink the rest of the bottle to try to get rid of that feeling. The third level are suicidal injunctions or actual suicidal ideation, the most serious in terms of self-destructive behavior. These result in actions that actually jeopardize the ongoing life of the person, such as extreme carelessness, risk-taking behavior, and actual attacks on the self. So what about the self-soothing part of the self-parenting process? These thoughts may not look on the surface to be negative, but they are limiting us. They are talking us out of going after the things we really want in life. So the first level are self-soothing attitudes. These are thoughts that are self-limiting, self-protective, and lead to lifestyles that are more inward, where we're turning more inward for gratification rather than going after the things we really want in life. Then there's self-aggrandizing thoughts. And I think that, everybody thinks, I want to feel good about myself. If only I could think well about myself. But there's a real distinction between real self-esteem and desperately wanting to think well of yourself. And self-aggrandizing thoughts tend to come in when we're trying to buoy our self-esteem, to make ourselves feel good by telling ourselves how wonderful we are. But when we do this, it's a very fragile sense of self-esteem. And almost anything that happens can knock us down because that self-esteem is on such a fragile footing. Then there's suspicious, paranoid thoughts towards others. These are thoughts that are very self-protective in feeling, but that can actually lead to alienation from others and destructive behavior towards others. Because in those paranoid thoughts, we see others as having negative intent toward us, and we may act back on them in terms of that negative intent that we perceive that may not even really be there. In terms of addictive behaviors or micro-suicidal behaviors, what we find is these are the thoughts that lure us into engaging in those behaviors in the first place. These are thoughts like, have an extra drink, you need to relax with those people tonight, or have an extra piece of cake, you've been good on your diet all week, it won't matter. But while these thoughts may sound friendly to ourselves on the surface, they're actually sabotaging thoughts if we're trying to break an addictive pattern. And lastly, there are overtly violent thoughts. And for some people, these thoughts are very comforting, thoughts of lashing out at others or getting back at others. But they actually lead to incredibly destructive behavior toward other people. So I think a good way to visualize our self and our anti-self is with Max here from the Wild Things, and the anti-self is the monsters from the Wild Things. And, when we give into our critical inner voice, whether it's the self-criticisms or whether it's the self-soothing part of it, we grow the monster. We feed it. It gets bigger and bigger and takes more and more control over our lives. What we want to do instead is we want to shrink the monster. We want to starve the monster by not acting on its directives. And when we do this, our sense of self grows and our anti-self fades into the background. Now, it doesn't mean we may never have those thoughts again, but they won't have so much of a hold over our behavior or be directing our lives. Now, when we do this, we're going to feel anxious because initially, when we don't act on our critical inner voices, they get louder, almost like a parent yelling at us to get us back into line. But if we can keep resisting acting on their directives, they will actually get weaker and weaker and fade into the background, almost like a parent that gets tired of nagging. So, to learn more about the division of the mind, visit our website, glendon.org. To learn more about voice therapy, our method for dealing with this critical inner voice, visit the Glendon Association website. And if you want to watch a brain shark specifically on the critical inner voice, just click here. To learn more about differentiating or separating from our past influences or the parents that live inside of us, again, go to our website, glendon.org. And if you'd like to watch a brain shark presentation on differentiation and becoming your best self, here's a link to it, and just press it. If you'd like to read more about what you've heard in this Brain Shark today, you can go to our book, Conquer Your Critical Inner Voice, which has lots of good exercises for both identifying and overcoming our critical inner voices. And also, if you want to learn more about differentiating from your past and really developing your real self, you can also read about that in our book, The Self Under Siege. If you'd like to see more live online presentations about these kinds of subject matters with myself, Dr. Lisa Firestone, come to our website, psychalive.org, and you will see all of our upcoming webinars listed. And if you'd like more information, feel free to go to our website, the Glendon Association, or to PsychAlive. And you can contact us at glendon@glendon.org if you want to send us an email, or call us at 1-800-663-5281. Thanks for listening to this Brain Shark.